All right. Well, so our last kind of section for the show today, here for episode 2 of the Husker Big Red Podcast, is we're going to talk some bold predictions for the 2022 season. And we did have, a few Twitter users that kind of put out some bold predictions the other day. So we're going to talk about some of those, and then we're going to put out some of our own bold predictions for this season. So first, we'll talk about some that we saw on Twitter, and maybe we'll talk about how likely or unlikely. We'll give some over under. So first one, though, I saw that the first bold prediction was a Nebraska fan. Couldn't find the tweet, but their prediction was that Nebraska was going to go 15-0 this year, which would mean that they won the Big Ten and won the college football playoff. So, Danny, I can tell from your face you might not think it's that realistic, but on a scale of 1 to 10, with 0 being no chance in hell and 10 absolutely happening, what's your scale there? What's your rating?
I'm gonna have an absolutely cop-out answer here and say 5. Who knows? I mean, that's the great thing about college football. Who knows? We have a good, easy start to the season for the first 2 games, and then Oklahoma. And so, who knows? I mean, at the very least, I just hope we can play in the winter months and have something to look forward to. 15-0, a little unrealistic, but you never know. I would love that, and it would make this team actually fun to cover. Let's be honest here.
Maybe Casey Thompson will find his inner Joe Burrow, and he'll be like a top 10 pick next year's draft after throwing for like 4,500 yards and
Heisman Trophy winning Casey Thompson.
yeah, exactly. That's about the only way I foresee that situation playing out. But maybe Mark Whipple really is the quarterback guru. I don't know. My scale though, I'm gonna give that a hard 0. I think that I don't think there's a chance that Nebraska, even if they did win the Big Ten, if it was just winning the Big Ten, maybe, but I can't see Nebraska beating Georgia or like Alabama or Clemson if it came to that. But you never know. Like I said,
And
maybe.
also don't forget that Nebraska can't have Scott Frost on the sidelines if they make any sort of like bowl because of those stupid sanctions about the stupid analyst who didn't help at all, because clearly our special teams were garbage. But yeah, so those sanctions could prevent Nebraska from going 15-0. So thanks, Jonathan Rutledge. You did absolutely nothing except screw over Nebraska.
And it's funny that you had how do you have extra special teams analysts and you get penalized for that? And you lose a goddamn game because your punter punts it to the complete wrong side of the field. Like I used to coach middle
Yeah,
school football.
clearly,
And that never happened.
yeah. I mean, clearly Jonathan Rutledge did not do his job, but he did manage to screw over Nebraska. So if I had to guess, there's no love lost between Nebraska and Rutledge there.
Yeah. So how we touched on it a little bit, but legitimately that was one person said, hey, I think Nebraska's going to be better than people think, and they can win the Big Ten West this year. How on the 0 to 10 scale, how realistic do you think that is?
Hmm. Again, I'll say 6 because they have all the talent to do so, right? We go through this every single summer. They have the talent on paper. It's about execution. I could definitely see it this year. I mean, now we have a group of coaches that can make sure things, don't get out of hand. We have a strong group of coaches. So I could see it. I really could see it, but it's all about, like you said, the Oklahoma game is kind of the big one that everybody's circling on their calendar. If they can beat Oklahoma and, start the season off strong, and a win over Oklahoma would do wonders for this program. And, I could see them just kind of rolling if that happens. If they don't, I could still see them getting on a nice little run. It's not going to be easy, but it's possible, especially if, all the talent that we've gotten, works the way we think it's going to.
Yeah, and if you beat Oklahoma, you get that confidence, and confidence is a huge factor. Then if you can beat Oklahoma, you can beat Wisconsin and Iowa and Minnesota, and that's really in Purdue. That's who Nebraska is competing with for the Big Ten West this year. None of those programs, I don't think any of them are should even be ranked really in the top 15. Going into the season, Wisconsin's probably the best, but Wisconsin's just extremely consistent. They're not going to beat you with a bunch of talent. Nebraska has as much talent as Nebraska, as Iowa or Wisconsin. So, yeah, I would give it a solid 5. I think, it's not totally unrealistic to say that this team could break out and win the Big Ten West if everything comes together.
Yeah, I don't think it's unrealistic at all. I mean, I think Minnesota seems to be our kryptonite over the past couple of seasons. And, to PJ Fleck's credit, he's doing a good job of, building a program over there, or at least keeping the program consistent, especially since that state is a hockey state. Let's be real here. So, I mean, Minnesota has always been a thorn in our side. And, Iowa, can you imagine beating Iowa? That would be wonderful. That would be absolutely wonderful.
That
That
w-
would definitely make my Thanksgiving turkey go down a little easier.
this year, it's
My
going to,
leftovers, anyway.
yeah, the leftovers. It's going to happen. It will happen. We're going to speak it into existence this year. Um,
C-
but
Because truthfully, we weren't that far. Like, we're not that far off. I mean, last year we were in the game. Weren't we up at one point, and then our defense kind of collapsed? Yeah, and then
I think we led by
20.
11 going into the fourth quarter.
Yeah, yeah, and then 2020. And Adrian Martinez fumble late in the game on a drive that could have led to points. That's not surprising, but yeah. So we've been close. We've been close, but hopefully this is the year, because you coaches say they don't think about rivalry games and this and that, but you can bet Scott Frost and the coaching staff wants to beat Iowa. Mickey knows what it means to, beat Iowa and the rivalry behind it. Bill Bush knows. All these coaches know what it would mean if Nebraska beat Iowa, so that would certainly be exciting.
That would definitely. I think Scott Frost is sticking around. If he beats Iowa this year. So now we've got. Let's kind of finish off here with our bold predictions. Our last part of the show. We're each going to talk about our bold prediction for the season. Not necessarily the record or anything, but just kind of a bold take that we have for the 2022 Huskers. So I'll let you go first, Danny. What's your bold prediction for Nebraska in 2022?
I said a 1,000-yard receiver, but I'm going to kind of shorten it down to a player prediction. I'm going to say that Omar Manning will have at least 500 receiving yards, and I don't think that's a bold prediction necessarily when you think that he had 384 yards last season. He's a type of player that I think needs a solid coach and, somebody to, you know, continue to encourage him and have him focused, and Mickey Joseph can do that. I think Omar Manning is finally going to reach that, big time player potential that we have been waiting for, because don't forget, he was the top rated junior college recruit just a couple of years ago. So the potential is there, and I could really see this being a breakout season for him. He's had a Mickey talked about it on Monday. He's been a guy that stood out in camp so far. So I'm curious to see what he can do, and I think at least 600 yards for Manning this year.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. We'll see how all the receiving yardage kind of plays out, and it could be 1,000-yard receiver. It might be tough with all the depth at receiver, but yeah, Omar Manning seems poised for a big year. Um, so that leads me to my bold prediction, and I'm going to go back to the pass rush that I've been talking about. I had an article this week on HuskerBigRed.com about how the pass rush was going to be fierce, and you kind of talked about Caleb Tanner and Nelson and O'Shawn Mathis all being on the field at the same time. My bold prediction is that I believe that both Garrett Nelson and O'Shawn Mathis are going to get double-digit sacks. So basically, I think those two players are going to have more sacks in 2022 than the entire Nebraska football team had in 2021 when they ranked tied for 98th in sacks. So it's going to this year they're going to get way, into the 30s, and that defense is going to get some turnovers and some takeaways, and that's going to help us get a winning record and get a bowl game or get back to a bowl game.
Right, and we've talked about Mathis a lot over the first couple episodes, but Nelson and Tanner should not be forgotten, particularly Nelson. I watched him during the spring game, and you know, it was the spring game was just more of what we always see from Nelson. He absolutely flies around the football. He's hungry for the ball. He never stops in his pursuit, and he's the type of player that can really be a cornerstone of a defense, and I love the way he plays. I love his energy. I love that he's not afraid to get muddy and dirty, and I love that he plays hard and has that motor. And if I were to build a blueprint of a player that I want on a defense, Garrett Nelson would be a guy that I would choose to mold my player after.
Yeah, Garrett Nelson's the guy that you want in your foxhole.
Yep,
So,
absolutely.
all right, folks. Well, that is going to wrap up episode 2 of the Husker Big Red podcast. You can find this podcast on all the, anywhere you find your podcast, Spotify, Apple, Google, Amazon. So make sure you follow us. Make sure you give us a rating. Give us some questions. Episode 3 will be coming up next week. You can find my content at huskerbigred.com. And you can also check out Danny at thegreatcornholio.org for all your Nebraska opinion and analysis. And as always, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.
All right, we will see you next week. All right, man.